Now it should be ready. Yeah, perfect. So hi everyone. Thank you for having me for this entrepreneurial track. I think probably most of you are software engineers, therefore entrepreneurial topics are somewhat less interesting until you are then there and want to build a startup, and then suddenly it becomes very important. And that's more or less the same thing that happened to me. I'm also a software engineer and ended up together with my longtime friend Kevin founding a startup, and then suddenly I had to care about all these entrepreneurial topics. And today I am here to talk to you a little bit about can you fix the world with a startup, which basically I will tell you a little bit about our story. It's been more or less exactly 3 years that my friend and I have started this enterprise, or adventure probably rather. And I am going to tell you what happened in these 3 years, and especially with the focus on, we started off with a very great idea. We wanted to set out and fix the world. And I have learned a lot of stuff and also wasted a lot of time in these 3 years, and I would like to tell you a little bit about what happened so that you don't make these mistakes. So the question that eventually will be answered today is, when you have a great idea, probably you want to set out and also fix the world, and I will help you probably avoid wasting a few of your months or years. Also, I have to add a little disclaimer. We are in the middle of the process. As I said, the startup is still there, still living. We are 10 people by now, and it's been going on for 3 years. So we are still in the middle of it. This is not a success or a post-mortem story, but rather what I learned so far. So you hear it really from me live and from the pulse. I am sorry that I have to start with a little bit of theory first. I know you're not here to, again, today being lectured, but we have to be on the same page in terms of theory, and I promise to keep it short as possible. But I have to tell you a little bit about when we develop software, where software ends up living. And this is the topic is mainly about data centers. And also we will discover how software has an impact and an environmental impact on our planet. And for that, I brought a few numbers, because we are at ETH, right? You all probably love numbers. And the first number I'm going to start with is 15%. 15% is the average utilization rate of a data center. This means that of 7 data centers that are there 7 servers that are there in a data center, only 1 server is actually used. I come to that. What's the reason for this? Another number is around 75%. 75% of the CO2 and other greenhouse gas is already emitted from a server before you plug it in the first time. So the production process and everything already uses up 75% of CO2. Now I have a third number that's 60%. 60% is the amount of electricity that the whole infrastructure of a data center uses, and only 40% of the electricity that goes into a data center is actually used to compute stuff. The rest is mainly for cooling. And of course, if you put a data center in the desert, that's way more. If you put it in Nordics, in Finland, then it's of course less, but on average it's 60%. And then I have 2 comparisons, so just to give you a little bit of scale, that you can imagine how big the impact of compute actually is on the environment. All the data centers in the world use up more or less the same amount of electricity as the country of India. So it's a fairly big electric consumption. And doing so, all the data centers in the world emit more or less the same amount of greenhouse gas as all of air traffic combined. So this means all the airplanes more or less cause the same amount of CO2 exhaustion as all the servers in the world. So you see, we have a real problem, and this is really the problem that we set out to solve. And then we noticed that during our time when we used to walk around in data centers and work in the industry for combination of 20 years, I would say. And then we set out to try to come up with a business model and an idea on how we could solve that. And then we sat down and imagined, how should the data center of the future look like to be able to get rid of these problems? And there is 3 things that we found. One thing is that when a data center, basically, as I said, 60% of the electricity is used for cooling. This means that 60% also is exhausted in heat. And what a data center essentially does is you put in electricity, the servers run, you heat up the air for cooling, right? And then the heat is just exhausted out into the air again. This means that data centers literally heat up the planet. Therefore, a data center of the future should make use of this heat by, for example, heating homes or, I don't know, baking bread or brewing beer or whatever you can do with heat. There is a lot of applications for heat. Second thing that the data center should do is we should start using it more efficiently and also more effectively, which means that these 1 in 7 servers that I talked about, we should bring this number down to maybe 50% utilization, 70% utilization. Companies like Google, they achieve almost 80% utilization, and we want to have that for every data center in the world. And the third thing is, of course, when we start making a data center more intelligent in terms of when it computes stuff and when it doesn't, then we should also take into account the availability of renewable energy sources, for example, solar, wind power and everything, so that a data center actually doesn't compute stuff when there is no solar and wind power, and it starts computing more when these renewable energies become available. And then, so if you recap this and think about it, okay, we need to utilize a data center better, we need more heat that's coming out of it, and we need to take into account the availability of renewable sources. Then overall, what we're going to have is intelligent scheduling of workloads. This means that we came up with the idea of building a platform that takes all the computational problems that are out there in the world and keeps them in a queue, and then until we have enough renewable power and until there is servers in data centers that are currently not utilized, and then we place these workloads in these data centers and they're being computed and then reported back the result. This is really our idea to trying to fix the world with a startup. And of course, we set out to do this, and we tried to really find out how we can make this work also from an economical perspective, basically come up with a business model. Right now we had the idea, make a platform that utilizes these data centers, kind of a virtual cloud or however you want to call it. And then we had to come up with an idea of how are people going to pay for this? Why should people buy this? And then we did, as usual, when you start building a startup, then we started talking to people, started talking to data center operators, started talking to power companies, to software companies. Hey, how can we make this work from an economic perspective? And what we essentially came up with is the business model. We always, it's not technically a correct comparison, but we always call it, for better understanding, the Airbnb for compute. Because what we essentially do is there is spare servers that are just idling around. There is people wanting to compute things, and normally, traditionally, these people would just buy new servers. But what we do is we take their workloads and place them in a data center that at this given time has capacity to compute it. And as for us, so that we also get to take home a salary at the end of the day, for us, we take a platform fee that just is a percentage of what we are going to compute for them. And just to tell you a little bit more about this business model, why it's actually a great business model, it has all the features that the business model needs to have. The demand customers, we call them the customers that buy compute, they get compute way cheaper than when they would buy servers themselves, right? Because these servers on the data center, they are idling anyway. So we just have to cover the electricity cost. Otherwise, they're already there. Therefore, for people buying this capacity, it's cheaper. For the data centers, it's obvious because they can make money off their idling capacity. So they just basically don't have to do anything, just give us their bank account and then money starts flowing in. That's also pretty obvious. And for us, obviously, we take a platform fee and calculated that we are still cheaper than any competition. And the third thing that a business model, if you want to build a startup, the third thing that a business model needs to have, it needs to be scalable, which basically means that the amount of people that you need in your company is not growing in the same amount that your customers are growing. And our business model also had that, because we can build this platform and then just start attaching data centers, as many as we like, and bringing on customers as many as we like, basically with the same stuff. Of course, there is someone having to pick up the phone and stuff like that. But so it was a scalable business model. As I said, just to give you a few numbers, we overall, in the course of these 3 years now, we have talked to over 150 people, potential customers, and also data centers, whether or not they would buy such a thing if it was there. Signed over 20 letter of intents, so it's basically a non-binding contract with customers if they would use it. And then we thought we were ready. To build this startup. And then what we did is we calculated how many people we need for that, how much time we need for that, and we ended up hiring 5 software engineers that would actually be able to build this. And we estimated that with these 5 software engineers, we would require more roughly 2 years to build the platform to be able to do all of that, what we set out to do. So just as a little recap, we had everything. We had a problem, a real problem. There is data centers heating up the planet. This is something that needs to be solved. We had an idea on how to solve it, build a platform that makes use of this rather than ever building new servers. We had the business model to how we could earn it and how we can scale it and everything. We had the team. We had interviews. We had done interviews and even contracts with a lot of customers that said, yeah, call me the minute it's there because we want to use it. So basically you would think that this is everything you need for building a startup, right? And then you should be able to go. And then we set out and we tried to get money for that. And this is where it becomes tricky, because we have to, as I said, we are a team of 7.5 people eventually. And these 7.5 people, they need to eat, right? Therefore, we need money to finance this whole thing. And then we set out, and then we in our heads, this was the perfect story for investors. We had everything figured out, we had confirmed interest, and we went to the investors and said, okay, this is our idea, this is the amount of cash that we need to survive for these 2 years, and then everything will work. Only that we didn't get any money. And I don't know, maybe one of you has an idea why. Not really. Yeah, me neither. But I eventually figured it out, or we figured it out. And the reason was no one pays you for building an idea. The only thing that you can do to get money is get paying customers. So this is the only thing that we didn't have. And therefore, this is really eventually what basically at the end of the day my message will be. You have to have customers in order for building a startup. So what we did is we sat there with this team of 7 people, basically, no interest in the investment community, and then we're like, okay, what are we going to do now? And what we did is we basically started from scratch. This time with trying, the first thing that we had to do with this is trying to find customers. And this is really eventually then what brought us a success, or as I said, we are still in the process, so I'm still not sure if this is going to be successful, but this is really the way we did it. It's really not possible. So to answer already, we're only half into the talk, but I can already answer the question that is basically in the title of the talk. Can you fix the world with a startup? The answer is no, unless you find a way of getting customer for it from the very beginning. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we did that, and so trying to, if you have the idea to fix the world, how you could approach this and wasting much less time than we did. So what we essentially did is we had to come up with a plan that would eventually end up in implementing this idea that we had in the first place. As I said, the idea was to build a platform where people can buy cheap compute, we place it in data centers, use servers that are already there, compute it for them, and then ship the result back. So our platform essentially needs to be as I said, do very intelligent decisions, but that is not something that a customer cares about. You cannot sell a customer, hey, by the way, here is my platform, you can start buying compute here, and the value that you get is, this will be very intelligently scheduled. No one pays you for that. So I said before that our business model essentially is that the compute that you buy on our platform is cheaper than on the competition, because we are using these virtual. We are a data center that doesn't own any hardware, so we don't have to pay all these expenses. Now, how can you get cheaper compute than all the competition today? How can we get a customer today and already offer them the value that they will later on have from our platform? There's a few things. We could buy hardware and then just offer it for them for the prices that we will eventually end up having. But remember, we don't have any money, so we cannot buy hardware. We could, of course, trying to get, for example, old second-hand hardware, but then we have the problem that we will drastically lower the quality of service for them, so they will also hate us, and eventually we want to end up with a product that the customers love and already offers all the values that later on we are having. And luckily we found a way to cheat our way into that, and the way we did that is that we leverage basically the spot instances of public clouds. Spot instances is Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all the vendors or the public cloud hosters. They offer a similar thing. I said before that Google managed to get a utilization of around 80%. The way Google does that is they actually sell their spare capacity too. So we didn't come up with this business model, we stole it basically there. And therefore we figured, okay, if we are able to leverage this offering from the public clouds, these servers are 70 to 80% cheaper than when you buy normal servers. Therefore, if we are able to leverage this and today make our customers able to use it that way, then we can offer them competitive prices that are close to the prices that we eventually will end up having when our platform is there. So what we did is we found a way to package the software of our customers, because maybe another short theory excursus, these spot instances, they have a few things that make it difficult for them to use. One is that the operator can always shut them off within, for Google it's 30 seconds, for Amazon it's 60 seconds, or it's vice versa, I'm not completely sure, but they can just signal you and tell you, hey, I'm going to shut down the server in 60 seconds, and then the server is gone. So when you have client applications on that server, obviously someone needs to take care of that. So store everything, move it to another server, spin it up again, and then continue computation there. Also for a lot of applications, it's not possible to pause the computation. So all these things need to be taken care of. That's why it's today very hard for customers to actually make use of this technology. And this is the value that today we are offering our customer, resulting in us being able to offer them prices that are way better than every competition where they could buy compute resources, which will eventually be the value that we offer to the customers by making use of these idle data centers, but we don't have to build the whole platform already to make it work. And then we can already today get customers onto our platform. It's a fake platform basically, but we have customers, and then once we have customers, we will get investors, and we will get the money to actually build the real platform that we set out to do in the first place. So I just have to check also the time. Yeah, I'm pretty good in time. So to wrap this up, what happened after that is we figured this out, and then we started to actually get customers, and these customers love us for exactly what we want to in our original business model. Remember, what we offer the customer is that they get cheaper compute, right? And we today can get customers onto our platform by means of selling cheaper compute to them than when they buy servers themselves or put servers rent servers from a data center themselves. So we're already offering them the exact value that they would have had after we spent 2 years of building the platform, but it's already there for them. And So in a way, these customers are very happy already today, and this is much more fun than working 2 years in the cellar, and then with us 7 engineers just sitting in the cellar and programming the whole platform, and then go out and try to sell it. Already today, we have the feedback of customers that they love our product 2 years earlier than what we would have achieved if we managed to get money in the first place. So therefore, the message is it's not necessarily bad that we didn't get this investment. It's just to set the expectations right with everyone that listens, that no one will pay you for just a great idea, but you have to make sure that you get customers. So to try to wrap this up and to put a little, I would say, a system behind it that you can also, when you have a great idea how you want to fix the world, and you are considering building a startup with that, I would like to try to give you a checklist maybe on how you could do that. And really the very first thing is we started off great. We had a problem that we wanted to solve, and was really also, like our ambition to solve it, and it was really, really dear to us. This is very important. You have to basically fall in love with your idea, otherwise you will never have the endurance and the passion to eventually end up solving it, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of downs. And once you have that, and once you figure out, okay, I am going to build a solution for that problem in this and that way, then what we did is we set out. We thought we were ready. We started. Don't do that. Start with trying to come up with a plan that results in, the first thing that you have to do is have to find one customer, even if it's your mother. That's perfectly fine, but you have to find one customer that will validate your ideas and actually pay you money for it. And then once you have done that, then you have to do a second thing, and then maybe, depends a little bit on your idea, maybe you then as a second step have to build a team that will eventually be able to actually implement it. Or if you don't have to do that, if you can do it all yourself, find 9 more customers. And then when you have 10 customers, then you can actually build your company, and you can start building the team and also raising the money that you will need to implement your big idea that will eventually fix the planet, right? And therefore, the strategy, that the plan that you define in the very beginning has to have these steps basically in your mind. You have to have these steps laid out. You have to have a roadmap, but don't skip any steps. You have to really start with a customer, get 9 more, and then you can start working on your big idea. But it's very important that you find a value proposition for these first customers that will eventually be the value proposition that you will offer them once your big idea is there. So you cannot, basically, we couldn't have opened an ice cream shop. Of course, everyone loves ice cream, and we would have gotten a lot of customers, but they wouldn't have bought from us for that value proposition that we would offer them later on. So your plan really needs to make sure that this is going to work. And if you can't do that, for either it's not possible, there is a lot of problems out there that are not solvable by a startup because of this very reason, that you can't get customers. For us, it worked out, but there might be ideas out there that are too big to get customers up front. If there is only one customer and it's, I don't know, the government of the United States, is probably pretty difficult to already get them as a customer before having any money, right? So if your idea is too big, or also maybe you are not the type to start talking to customers without having a product, then there is other ways to get your idea done anyways. And you can also talk to corporations, most of the bigger corporations, they have a head of innovation manager, I don't know, incubator labs and everything. Just try to find the right corporation that can also help you with that, and then this will also work. So you can fix the world also in corporations, although this is a little bit counterintuitive, but you can also try this way. I wouldn't know yet, because I'm still believing that I can help fixing the world with my startup, but yeah, it's not the only way, definitely. So as takeaways, I have said almost everything. To sum up and answer the question that I initially asked you, if you have a great idea and want to fix the world, then you can do that with a startup, but only if you manage to get customers very early on. Otherwise, try to find a different way. And with that, I can only leave you with, if this is really something that will come up in your future, then I can point you to a few resources, because it will make your life way easier. And there is a lot of great resources out there. Mainly the main word that you need to remember from this, if you want to set out and do this, is basically the Lean Startup method. You can go, basically there's one book that's called Lean Startup, and then there's a lot of different books, and also, for example, there is a meetup here in Zurich about Lean Startup. Just be aware that you're not the only one reading these books. The investors read them too, and these books are written by basically companies that the investors loved enough to finance them. So there is a lot of successor bias in these books. So you will never, or there's almost no books written by people that failed. Therefore, the investors will want you to behave exactly as it's lined out in these books, and also always keep that in mind, that they also read these books. So you're not buying a secret to building a startup with them. But still, you still have to read them, because this is the way that the investors expect startups to be built. And there you will read that the very first thing you have to do is find a customer. And with that, I would like to open the round for questions. And I know I didn't talk too much about our actual startup and about the technology, and probably all of you would love to hear that. I will be outside for a beer afterwards, and will, of course, since I'm the CTO, I will love to tell you a little bit about the technology, so just come and grab a drink with me. Thank you.
So, as you heard, now comes the fun part, the questions, and maybe you also have challenging ways in how to find money, probably. So, if you have ideas or questions, please speak up. I will bring you the microphone, and then you can ask your questions. Or you can ask from home, so please send us your questions in the link below. You will have to find the blue room, and our helpers will read them aloud.
So thank you for this talk. I have two questions for you. So my first question is, you mentioned this kind of temporary solution until you actually do the server thing, right? Are you already there, or are you still in this temporary stage of with the system, with the cloud stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Waiting for the second question. Yeah, we are still in this phase where we implement all our customers onto the public clouds, and we haven't attached any other data centers yet. So
do you? Sorry. Do you think that's you're getting close, or is it still very much in the future?
That's a good question, because it's a little bit. As I said, we would like to have 10 customers first before we continue to the next phase. And this 10 is basically just a number we made up. Also, you read, if in the literature, you read that this is more or less the number that's expected. But as soon as we have 10 customers, we will probably start doing it a little bit in parallel, because the idea is that these 10 customers are basically from a very similar market segment. And then after you have 10 customers, or you call it, it's called market penetration, when you identify a segment that you can have, for example, 50% market penetration. This means that, okay, there is 20 companies that do, I don't know, machine learning in Switzerland. We need to have 10 of them before we can confirm that our product is worth something for this segment. So then we would start doing it in parallel. One thing is that for these existing customers, we would start bringing in these data centers and using the infrastructure that we have on the public clouds for the next segment, so that it starts to become kind of like a pipeline where customers would first be moved to the public clouds and then move to these other data centers. So probably it will eventually end up in being developed in parallel, but we're not close because, as I said, it's a lot of work. And of course, when I said that when we would have locked ourselves down in the cellar, it would have taken us 2 years. But because we have to now also take care of customer requests, support, also build some tiny custom features for specific customers, it's probably going to take us 3 years until we're there, right? Or maybe even 4, but at least we survived these 4 years. Therefore, it's obviously a little detour in that sense, as compared to if we had infinite money.
Yeah, I see. Thank you very much. You actually also answered my second question with that. Thanks.
Perfect.
So we have a few online questions. The first one is, are you still looking for investors despite now having paying customers?
So generally, the customers that we have, it's not enough to be a self-sustaining company yet. So yes, of course, but we just, the investors that we are looking for, we are basically it's called a seed round, try to raise a seed round. And of course, since we now have decided to make this detour towards the customers, of course, we are going to take a little bit more time and to basically hit pause on the fundraising until we are there, so that we can raise a reasonable round. Also, of course, you always have to negotiate terms and everything. So we basically made a pause until we have these customers, because, as I said, we tried to raise money in the seed round, and no one would give us any. Or almost no one, not completely no one, but almost no one will give us any. And then we figured all of these investors said, okay, give me customers first, and we can talk about these terms that we want to have. And therefore, we set ourselves different goals. So now we are not actively trying to raise money, but we first want to achieve these goals that we set ourselves and then start talking about another round.
Thank you. And the second question is, what market segments are your customers coming from? What are you targeting?
So there is, from our broad strategy, there is basically 3 main segments. That is the 3D or general computer rendering, computer CGI. And there we have identified as a first segment architectural visualization, which is basically artists doing visualizations based on the plans and 3D models of a building. They do photorealistic visualizations of that. This is our very first segment across Europe. Normally you would also add the geography there. And then second segment is, of course, expanding this knowledge that we built in 3D CGI rendering and everything out to other things. For example, we have a list of what we want to do. Most likely it's going to be film studios, animation studios. So because we can use more or less the same technology for them that we use, and then maybe there is a third segment that could be, I don't know, computer-generated images of the moon. I don't know, but generally sticking to the visualization rendering part. And then, of course, the second segment, or the second technology-wise segment that we then tackle is AI and machine learning, because this is really from a computing perspective, really the space where most compute is being used or needed, and also the fastest growing. But it's a little bit more challenging from a technical perspective, because we need to figure out there is huge amounts of data involved, right? Therefore, it's a little bit more challenging. Therefore, it's our second segment.
Thank you for the talk. I have a question about how you found your first customers and who gave you the starting capital to start this business.
Yeah, so about the starting capital, we were lucky enough that we had personal connections to a Germany-based, they call it think tank, but it's basically their purpose is basically helping startups before they have incorporated and up until incorporation. And also they work as angel investors. So angel investors is basically just normally friends and family, and there is also professions, but it's normally individuals and not companies that invest in startups. And usually, usually you would look in your private net, in your personal network for them, and because to start a company you don't need that much money, and we were lucky enough to know them, and they gave us the first starting capital. And the downside of angel investors is that it takes a lot of time, because they make rather small tickets, 5,000 Swiss francs or 10,000, you know, this is more or less the size that we're talking about. And of course, now that we're a company of 7, of course, you have to meet quite a few people to get to your monthly salary costs. And the first customers is actually similar, that we also from these angel investors that we have, we then basically created a short list of customer segments. As I said, the list is probably, I think, 25 segments long, and then we just tried to do LinkedIn outreach in the top 3. We quantified and qualified these segments and said, okay, in this segment we are going to have these technical challenges, is probably this market size, and then prioritize them accordingly, and then we just did LinkedIn outreach. So really on LinkedIn you have to pay LinkedIn Premium, which is incredibly, insanely expensive, but anyways, you would just filter for all of these companies. You can filter for CTO in architectural visualization companies in Europe, and then you get a list, and then just write them.
So how long did you work in the industry before you started this idea? And also, what made you feel secure enough to start it? Or did you start it in a parallel as a hobby?
Yeah, we worked in the industry for, well, depends what you call the industry. I was a software engineer in different roles for almost 15 years. I would say, yeah, as I said, different roles, but in the cloud industry, I mean, the cloud is probably 10 years old, and that really, I always had some remote touch points with the cloud, but I wouldn't say, you know, like, I wouldn't have called myself a cloud engineer before starting this company. Of course, you always use the little cloud technologies, and so therefore, yeah, it's difficult to say. And the security that I would say that this is a very good question, because this is a very important aspect of how can you get the confidence to actually start a company. And the only thing, or the necessary thing right there, is that you feel secure enough that you would get another job. So and all does not only work for us founders, but also for the whole team, that we are confident enough that if this doesn't work, then we're not out on the street. Well, not for long at least. Therefore, probably currently, like during Corona, I probably wouldn't have had the confidence, because it's currently tougher to find a new job. So I wouldn't say that I knew what I was doing when I started it, of course. But we just surrounded ourselves with people that we trusted, that they know what they were doing. As I said, we had these 2 friends that have this think tank / incubator, however you want to call this, but they had worked in startups before, and also a few of our employees have worked in startups before. And then you would just always talk with them on a daily basis and say, hey, are we doing the right thing? And then eventually you just have to convince yourself that to the best of your knowledge you're doing what's right. And it's probably a matter of convincing yourself at the end of the day, and also minimizing risks towards that you, if it fails, you can still get a job as a software engineer.
Okay. And another question, like you said, you're a team of 7 people, right? So that's like $500,000 to $1 million per year. Are you liquid enough for that with your customers at the moment? How is it sustainable?
Yeah, so as I said, we had to set out for and really get enough of these angel investors that I said before for covering these costs on the way. And then we try to set out to, because this is constantly our, I would say for us it was during the last year, at least it was a 100% job, which means that my co-founder basically was busy with more or less only this to make sure that we survive from month to month, right? Therefore, that's the reason why we then at some point wanted to raise a bigger round so that we can focus on the product at some point, because this is not something that can go on forever. Otherwise, it's just, yeah, I wouldn't call it wasted time because you learn a lot from investors as well, but still, you have to at some point be able to focus again, and therefore, it has been really time consuming to survive during this with the help of these angel investors.
All right, we're almost at the end of our question. We will make one more from at home.
Someone wants to know what is the best way to get customers, and did you work with sales experienced people?
The best way to get customers is, as I said, we did over 150 interviews before actually, well, starting our company but at the beginning. And there, of course, this list I talked about of these 25 potential segments that we want to tackle, and then the top 3 to approach them. We did, of course, try to get interviews with them before even deciding that this is going to be our segment. And some of them we even knew through a few corners personally. Others we got introductions. For others we just wrote them on LinkedIn, basically. And eventually, if you call someone or write someone an email and tell them, hey, I have this idea for a startup that could help you. Would you like to give me a few answers? I'll buy you lunch or a coffee or a beer. Basically, everyone would talk to you. So the best way is to go to really, you can the more engineer you are about this, the more open people are. You can go there and say, hey, I just want to know what you do in your daily life. And by the way, I'm trying to eventually fund a startup. Everyone will tell you everything. And then after you have this list, of course, it's important to write everything down, right? And have a log of these conversations you had, because then half a year later, when you actually came up with a value proposition that is in accordance with these interviews that you did, because you want to learn all of that to figure out a value proposition for exactly these people, right? Therefore, if you want to if you identify eventually the CTO will buy my product, don't go talk with an engineer, don't go talk with the CEO. Try until you get to talk with the CTO if he's the one that will make the decision to buy your product. And then you do an interview with them. As I said, they will gladly answer you. Then you go home and you figure out a value proposition that answers exactly what they do. Don't do that for one person, but after you have done 15, 20 interviews with similar people, then you know how this value proposition has to look like. Then half a year later, write them back, hey, you can create a website with this value proposition on it and below a buy button. Then you can write them the link, send them the link and say, hey, look, half a year ago we talked and this is what I came up with. Would you buy that, or would you like to have another beer and talk about how much you would actually pay for this? And then you can get the ball rolling that way. Do interviews, talk to people. That's really it.